Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia, and this is my mother, Ima. Hey, Ima.
Hello, my little sweetness. You better make me sound good and look good on this video.
Oh, I don't take
You'll
kindly to
never
threats,
hear the
Ima.
end of it.
Sure, whatever.
My
Um,
ghost will haunt you.
yeah, at least I'll have company. Um, so today's topic is talking about following in your parents' footsteps and raising children. And
Getting
sub
your revenge.
yeah, a subplot, preparing your children for a non-timid life. So
Well,
let
I
me
never had that problem because there's something about your genetics
yeah.
where, let's put it this way, timidity, shyness. For those of you who don't speak English, timidity means shyness. Does not run in our family.
No, it does not. Um, but I guess it's funny because I look at how I was raised, and the older I'm getting, the more I'm understanding, you know, what you guys as parents did. And it's the conclusion really is you did the best you could with what you had. And
And we didn't have much.
exactly. Um, I remember looking at as a young kid. I remember I was walking with you to from shul with like my younger siblings, and I think like I was being like annoying, or my younger brother was being like a little disrespectful, and you just grabbed him, turned him around, and potched him on the tush. And I remember specifically a car was going by, and some guy screamed, "Hey, don't hit your kid!" And you screamed at him, "I'll do whatever the heck I want." Um, but it's funny because when it comes to disciplining a child back in the day in the 90s, it was like slowly getting phased out corporal punishment, but it still was something that people did. Like nowadays, it's almost impossible. Like I don't think anybody really like mainstream does corporal punishment for to their kids. But like I could imagine when you were a kid, you definitely got corporal punishment. And if
that was a that was an understatement.
well, what's funny is that I could imagine your parents probably got it worse than you.
Yes, that's what they told us when we
Yeah.
complained about how much they were hitting us. My father told me it wasn't a fraction of what I got as a kid.
And that's what's happening. Like nowadays, we're finding a more gentler approach and finding a more productive approach to raising children. So like it's not that it's not that like we're raising our kids like our parents raised us. It's more of like we're chipping away the negativity or the more rough coarse edges of the way we were raised and getting down to a more gentler essence of what our parents were trying to teach us.
Well, when you suggested this topic, I wasn't even thinking in terms of punishments or anything like that. I was thinking I was thinking in terms of like decisions like yes, you may have something, you may not have something, you have to go to camp. Like one of the things that you complained about to me
Oh yeah.
was that you didn't like camp, you never wanted to go, and that we basically forced you and that you hated it. But I said to you, once you get your own kids, you might try, you might, if the kid said he doesn't want to go to camp, you might remember, okay, I remember how bad I felt with my parents forcing me to go to camp. So you might at first say to your child, okay, that's okay. You don't want to go, I won't send you. And then you're going to start like day after day, your kid being bored, your kid just sitting around the house, your kid not having a schedule. And then you're going to say to yourself, this is why my parents sent me to camp. And it won't surprise me if after you do that little experiment, if you say to your child, that's it, I'm finished, you are going to camp.
I don't think it will get to that. I think the point is I understand that camp is a necessary evil in my sense. I don't like it. I think it's annoying. I think it's I'm not talking about like regular camp that like Jewish kids that aren't from go to. I'm talking about from Jewish camp is like the worst kind of camp to go to because you don't do anything. You have like a couple trips here and there. You play some junky sport for like 2 hours, and the rest of the time you are sitting down and learning and not moving an inch. except you're outdoors, so it's totally different and new. It's just like it's terrible and I hate it, but it's like,
I think
what other
I
options
don't.
do I have?
Well, I think the girls. I don't know about so much
Girls'
about the
camps are
boys'
better,
camps, but
Ema. No,
yeah.
girls' camps are way better. I was super jealous of my sisters, how the girls' camps, they paid more attention to them. They gave them more creative outlets. They gave them more fun things to do. They put them on more trips. They had less intense, rigorous learning in the summer. So like the girl camp was exactly the camp that I wanted to go to, but I couldn't because I'm a boy. I wasn't allowed to. So all I had was the camp I had, which was like Parksville, Camp Ganystrol, Detroit, Camp Ganystrol, Parksville, Tamimim, whatever name you want to call it. They all have the same schedule. Wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning. You get out of bed for reveille at 7:30. You learn Chassidus for about an hour. You go ahead and have davening, which takes another hour. Then you have lunch, which breakfast, which takes about an hour, and then you have learning, which takes about 3 hours, and then you have breakfast. Then after the learning for 3 hours, you have lunch at like 12, and then after lunch, you go ahead and you play sports for 2 hours. Then you go back to learning again, and then you go ahead and have a night activity, and then that's your day, and you go back to sleep.
But what I remember though is I know that in some of the boys' camps, don't they have color war?
Yes, during the 3 weeks they have color war, and part of the activities
Uh-huh.
is Tanya Balpeh, or learning sessions, and how quiet you can be and how good you could be in learning in the classes.
Because the girls' color war, they had skits and they had art projects
We
and
had that too.
they wrote songs.
So
And
what they did was, instead of the recreational sports that you had for those 2-3 hours, you went ahead and did color war for those 2-3 hours. The rest of the schedule for learning, they did not stop. You had the same situation, the same scheduling. It's just that now you're pinned against each other to see who could be the more behaved person, because then you get more points to the color war.
But I remember when you went to Detroit, I mean, I saw pictures of you guys boating, going
Yes,
kayaking
Ema.
or boating something in Detroit.
One day of the year,
And
of
that
the
was
time,
it.
you can go boating. You know how many times I went swimming in Parksville? Once. They did
Don't
it
they have swimming almost every day there?
for the younger crowd, but at my age of getting there, we only went once. We only had the artistic making that whole like wooden piece thing. It was like one time, and we never got to finish it. The older counselors and people in charge finished it and painted it and everything. We only like cut around the shape of that. That's all we did. It was a
I
total
had no
scam.
idea.
It was a total
It's
scam.
sad. I mean, it should be. I mean, that camp should have more of an, in general. I remember having a discussion with one of the principals of one of the Jewish boys' schools in Baltimore,
Yeah.
and I said to him, you have boys in your school who have artistic ability, who have music ability. Are you doing anything to let these boys
Nope.
use these outlets in school and show them
None
that
of it.
this is just as much Torah as anything else and is appreciated? And all I got was this merely, well, this is the way it is, from this particular principal. And I think it's very, very upsetting. I think you've got a very good point. There's no reason why the Jewish boys' schools shouldn't, have outlets for art, for music, for sports. I mean, this is part of what you need growing up. This is part of mental and physical health,
What
which is just as important as Torah learning. Because if you don't have good mental health, if you don't have good physical health, guess what? You can't learn Torah. It's gonna, you're gonna fall short in learning Torah because you're gonna be too weak or too sick to be able to apply yourself. And these things are just as important. I think you've got a very good point. I wish the Jewish boys' schools would start to change a little bit and have these outlets. In fact, I was discussing this with a psychologist in Baltimore, a very prominent psychologist, and we were both agreeing that they put these boys in a pressure cooker. They expect them to sit all day and learn. They give them no recreational or creative outlets. And then when they have fights breaking out and have discipline problems, they wonder why, or they blame it on the child. The child's got a problem. He needs to see a psychologist. Maybe you should look at your program.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to tell you actually that because of the lack of artistic creative outlets that I had in growing up, it definitely affected my line of work. Because as an architect and as a designer, there's a certain train of thought that I need to I'm playing catch up on. I'm totally missing a whole chunk of my education because when
Mhm.
all these other kids, whether they went to public school or private school or not, they still had like, recreational time where they played the oboe or they played sports on some constructively playing sports. Because in these camps where we played sports, you would play like what I would say like you would have 2 hours playing baseball, no coaching, no real explaining anything. You weren't allowed to slide. You get 5 strikes, and you there was really no like explanation of trying to teach children what sports really means. Because this I'm detracting a little bit, but I just recently started watching like coaches and sports and how they react and how they're teaching somebody. And I see on Instagram and YouTube where it's like these coaches are training these kids playing lacrosse or playing football or playing basketball. And the way the coaches are teaching them, they're teaching them life skills
Mhm.
of teamwork and comprehension and working with other people. So like when they're playing sports, they're really playing a sport that is helping them in the long run. With us, you have some like I would be, 12 years old, some 16-year-old kids like, okay, here's your stuff, here's your mitt, here's your ball. Go ahead and play. You have 3 strikes. You can't slide. I'll be in the back. And then they're just like getting burnt out or whatever. And you're like, what do we do? What do I like? I had
Yeah,
no idea
I agree
until I
with you
was
totally on that. Yeah.
yeah, I had no idea until I was much older that like certain positions in the baseball game were actually more strategic. I thought they were all equal. I had no idea. I
Mhm.
didn't know that right field and left field were different, or that there was a statistics when it comes to like the center field and this. That. I had no idea there was anything like that because like the way the sports were taught to me was just very poor. And then when we wanted to
Yeah.
have oh my god, when we wanted to have Ivrit, just plain Ivrit in our high school, we had a
Mhm.
whole petition to get Ivrit in our high school. We got it for like 1 year in 12th grade, and that was it.
You should know
And
there are a lot of Jewish parents that totally agree with you. In fact, I've spoken to a lot of Jewish parents who are very upset about the fact that your child can go K through 12 to an Orthodox Jewish day school and not hardly be able to speak not one word of conversational Hebrew. I mean, there is no reason. There's no reason for that. I remember, well, the school your sisters went to, they started teaching Ivrit. It was horrible the way they taught it. It was horrible. Very little consistency. Um, just like that, to teach a foreign language, you have to do it at least a half an hour every day consistently. They did not do it that way. It is very upsetting. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of our Jewish schools really do have to change. There's no reason they can't take a half an hour each day and have conversational Hebrew. But you were mentioning about you weren't allowed to slide. I thought of a very funny incident that happened in, I believe it was college baseball. It made the news. What happened was there was some sort of very big collegiate baseball game that was happening. I forgot how far back this was. I think this was in the early 90s, not mistaken. And so this young man um, hit of course he hit a home run, but the way he did it was hit the ball, he ran around the bases. As he was coming into home base, one of the players caught the ball and was running forward towards him, like running towards him to tag him out. The young man who was running toward home base actually jumped up in the air, somersaulted over the player that was about to tag him. And then when he came down the other side, came down like full body, prone, and touched the base,
oh wow.
touched home base with his hand. So the officials wanted to, you know, uh, check into that and say, wait a minute, is it legal in collegiate baseball for someone to do something like that? And when I looked in the rules, they said there wasn't, let's put it this way, there was not a single rule that prohibited it.
Exactly.
And so they said, okay, there's no rules that, he jumped over this guy's head and went down the other side and touched base. And I guess, so they declared that team the winner.
That's awesome. I just also want to add to what you were saying about the girls' school. And as a teacher and a professional, do you think it's a good idea? I had no idea that the girls' school had like 1 or 2 classes that would only happen twice a month.
Yes, I remember that now. I think it was, I
Yeah,
forgot.
it was like
Was it
Navi or
Navi?
something.
I think it might have
Yeah.
been Navi. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think that also is another adding to the like, what the heck is going on? It's so chaotic.
Mm.
But back to what we originally were talking about when it comes to raising children. So what methods did you have, or what stories or notions did you realize that you were reliving your past as you were raising us?
I'm trying to think. I remember not me. I remember one time though. That's a funny aside. One of your sisters came into the room and started to say something about a complaint about something or point out something that one of your other sisters was doing, and all of a sudden she got this look of horror. She put her hand over her mouth and went, she goes, now I sound just like Ema. Ran out of the room.
Very cute.
Oh gosh. I'm trying to think, um do, 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 do. um in English we call it pecuniary. My pecuniary attitudes I I got from my parents. For those of you who don't speak English or standard English or higher level English, pecuniary means cheap, thrifty, etc., etc.
I think most people are cheap and thrifty. The older I'm getting, the more I'm realizing it's not such a special character trait. It's like everyone, their mother is trying to be cheap. Everyone, their mother's trying to like be thrifty. Only idiots spend out more than they earn and try to go nuts. Jeez Louise.
You see what else? My pecuniary.
That's dead air.
Going into computer processing. Please wait.
Doing homework. Doing homework.
Oh
Did your
yeah,
parents ever do homework with you?
my parents were pretty consistent with that. They homework came first.
Mm.
Which is a good habit to
Yeah.
get into. Coming. My mother would say, "Come home, sit down, do your homework. Just get rid of it. Sit down, do your homework, and then you get the rest of the night free."
So out of curiosity, like, did your parents help you with your homework?
Yes, as a matter of fact, they did. Well, I remember. Well, I remember one time. I remember a few things. One time, I remember my mother. I don't know what assignment she was helping me with, but I just wasn't getting it, and she was getting frustrated, and she was just starting to scream the problem at me. I think it's whatever the math problem. She was just screaming the problem at me over and over and over again, and I'm just looking at her and going, "Sorry, I didn't understand." Then my father coming into the room and saying, "It goes in one ear and out the other."
Oh gosh.
But then I remember there was one assignment that she was very helpful with. It was my first time doing one of these. You have to make a booklet.
Okay.
And making a particular booklet. I had and the teachers should have given us more guidance on this. She just told us make a booklet and include it, like make your own report. You can draw your own pictures and also include papers I passed out in class. And so I just did. I made some like reports, whatever, drew some pictures, and I just like stuffed it in this folder, and I was just going to turn it in. So my mother asked to see it, and she goes, "This is not." She goes, "This is not going to get you good. This is not good." She goes, "Let me show you what to do." She got construction paper. She got she got some nice paper. She showed me how to write out these reports in very nice handwriting. She took the pictures I drew. She showed me how to organize it. And then she took a hole puncher and she cut holes. She gave me the construction paper, draw a nice cover picture. I drew a nice cover picture and, colored it and everything. And then she put it together. She punched 3 holes in the side and took a pretty pink ribbon and put it all together with a nice pink ribbon on the side.
Oh, that's so
And
sweet.
so I think I got a B plus on it or something like that. But after that, I did these booklets much better. But like I said, the teacher, I don't know why, it's like my mother was the one who had to show me how to really put together a booklet. The teacher really did not show us how to do that. She just told us to do it rather than showing us an example of what, she was expecting, or, showing us some interesting things in the class, how to put it together.
I remember you telling me that education quality is at the highest at pre-1A kindergarten, and then it goes downhill until by the time you're in college, you're teaching yourself.
Practically, the teacher's asking you things on the test that he or she never covered. That's college is the worst. Yes.
Well, I mean, that's what I find so frustrating with college. What it's teaching you is not teaching you how to learn; it's teaching you how to deal in the workforce. Because in the workforce, no one's going to help you. No one's going to be sitting there holding your hand, trying to explain to you anything, sitting you down, having a cup of coffee, and showing you all the ropes. You're going to have to figure all that out by yourself. And college gives you the opportunity to be like, it's kind of sink or swim. It's kind of in the I don't know situation. And then
What?
that's
That's the problem with college, is that they don't give the students the practicalities. They don't train them in the practicalities of the skills that they're really going to need for that profession. They give you a lot of theory.
yeah.
They give you a lot of philosophy, but to actually show you the real challenges you're going to have and give you the skills to meet those challenges, they don't.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, when I was in college, they taught me a lot of theory. I was only able to understand some of it and part of it. And what really it's so I have to disagree with you a little bit on it. The only reason why I'm disagreeing with you is because in my you know profession, you have like the spectrums, very wide. And then in college is a very small strip of what they need to show you, and then work just slowly expands it, and through your lifetime you get a better grip and you see a wider view. But you need those philosophies and those concepts to understand in order to grow. I mean, people do find it frustrating because then they don't think they're employable, but most employees understand what they're getting themselves into. They would like to have you graduating college knowing everything and being really efficient, but that's just a pipe dream. It took me forever to get to where I am, and I still have other things I need to work on, and it's just like that's part of life. That's part of, working. And it's so funny because I think the one thing anybody that works, or anybody that goes to school struggles with, I would say, is paying attention to detail, and how there is always more room to pay more attention to detail. And the biggest question is, how do you expand that? Because there's this thing I was reading on there's a few articles, a few Instagram posts, a few like Reddit posts, and multiple people saying that like people from abused households have a hyper sense of reality and deep, and they're trying to say that it's trauma based. But if I could pay attention to more detail, I would consider that advantageous. I'm not trying to put anyone down. I'm just trying to point out, like, everybody's trying to be able to reach that moment of being able to have more attention to detail.
I think about that. More attention to detail.
Yeah.
But the study said that people who were from abused houses pay more attention to detail.
So it's kind of like they're hyper aware. They're hyper aware of
Uh-huh.
everyone's emotions. They're hyper aware of the environment. Like, I know I was able to figure out Tati's footsteps, when I was like in the basement, you know, hearing him come down from the top floor. So like that's that kind of hyper aware, and I understand like it, I think some things are just natural. You're naturally going to be more inclined. I think someone who's never been abused is going to be like what? Someone who never pays attention to detail. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like that. That's just it's just not adding up. But I
I
think what
don't
it's
think
saying
so.
is that when someone's in an abusive environment where they're always walking on eggshells, they're
Mhm.
hyper focused and they're trying so hard to keep everything in line and being a people pleaser and all that. So that kind of creates a different unhealthy understanding of detail. I think that's what it's really
Hmm.
saying.
I think it's also like a matter of survival because they know if they're not on their game, they're gonna they're gonna really suffer for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's kind of sad. I guess like every cloud has a silver lining, but you know, I would my heart really goes out to people that are from seriously abusive environments.
yeah. Not the
That's
fun abusive like we grew up. It is what it is. It happens.
That's what I
It's
was
life.
wondering about. I
Well,
was I was waiting for you to say something like that.
well, because it's just life. It's like I said this on a couple times in other podcast episodes, and it's kind of my philosophy and whatnot is that you know people. I'm not saying I'm not talking about horribly abused people. I'm talking about people who maybe like missed a few hugs or their parents were a little rough around the edges. Like, okay, we need to do better. That wasn't perfect, but that
Mhm.
wasn't abuse, in my opinion.
Mhm.
What
Yes, I
people
do.
like.
Because listen, I've got two sisters who were social workers
Yep,
in Baltimore
yep,
City.
yeah.
Oh boy,
They
yep.
could tell you stories,
They
and I know some
had
people who could
hardcore.
tell you
Yep.
stories.
They had
And once you hear
hardcore.
those stories, honestly, because I really was like really hardcore when I was younger, like, oh, it was horrible in my life, blah, 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 blah. And then I started like spending time with people that like really went through stuff. I'm like, oh no, no, my father still loves me and I still talk to him. It's just like it was just a moment of like, I just didn't like the fact that I was, he hit me a few times growing up because I told him that I wasn't gonna like do certain things. And he was a gruff man who, we all knew and didn't take no for an answer. But like that's something that like I would love to pass on my father's energy and the positive side of things. Definitely what he gave to me growing up. And I think what naturally happens to a lot of us boys in the family where like we have very intense, loud energy where we don't even have to try very hard and we can like command a room, so to speak.
I was
And
thinking about you just struck a chord because one of the things that I have to say that well, my mother had a tendency to be kind of on the mousy side.
yeah,
Just let things ride. But my father didn't, and my father always believed in like speaking up and especially social things that were going on, political things were going at the time. My father was the kind that would call the congressman, would go around talking to the neighbors, and I think my sisters and I we got that from him. My mother's attitude was, well, what's going to be is going to be, and you can't change it. And I say, oh yes, you can, and we will try. I would not take that for an answer. And I spoke. I think it was a cultural thing by her, which I don't understand because I think we discussed this once in a podcast that here her mother at the age of 17 had the gumption to come by herself on the boat from Russia. And yet for some reason that generation, I guess they were so beaten down, they felt so trampled on, or maybe they didn't want to make waves that
yeah,
coming to a new country, that she was raised with that attitude of be quiet, don't make waves, just go with the flow, and that type of thing. So, and my sisters and I, being we were raised, hey, Israel, when we were raised, hey, Israel was the new state, was the new country.
Yeah.
And now the Jews, Jews walking around very proud now of, basically being Jewish. And and sticking up for yourself and speaking up for yourself. So I think though in a way that I did get that from, like I said, from my father about you know do speak up, just don't let things happen.
Yeah. See, it's so funny you say that because I'm starting to feel a little bit of the opposite almost, where I saw you being very gung ho with calling your senator, calling your governor, calling her this, calling her that. And I did that a couple of times, but I just maybe it's the exposure of seeing all these corrupt stories, and just because like my view of information now isn't like very tiny and very small. It's a lot wider. Like I'm getting
Mhm.
information from what would happen in hypothetically like Texas, or what's happening in California, or happening this and like all these places, and even foreign places like what's happening around Israel, what's happening around Ukraine, what's happening now in other places like in Africa and things like that. So like I'm getting all this wider
Mhm.
view. So I guess emotionally for me, I'm feeling very
Mhm.
downtrodden and unmotivated, where
I
it's
think a
like,
lot, a lot of Americans in general, I think, are starting to, in certain respects, to feel that way. But the you know, no matter, somehow the United States has been through some amazing times, amazing, very difficult times, and somehow each um each crisis that the United States has met, the United States has pulled through, and there've been quite a
yeah,
few of them. And when I was in college, and oh my goodness, and students were rioting, and the anti-Vietnam demonstrations, and they were burning flags, they were rioting, and police were coming on campus with tear gas. We thought it was like the world was ending. We
yeah,
thought this was the revolution, and the United States is never going to recover. Well, guess what? Here we are. We're still working, we're still raising families, we're still we're still a country, and we're still going ahead. And believe it or not, if I remember when your sister did that research paper on organized crime,
okay,
that was amazing. That was when I read her research, that was a real eye opener. You think now is corrupt? You
oh
think
yeah,
now
back in the
bad stuff is
20s,
happening? Oh
back in the
my gosh.
20s, everybody was bought.
Even before the 1920s, the 1890s, there
Oh
was
wow.
a horrible, horrible whole sex trafficking operation that was operating from Chicago.
Hmm.
I don't know if do we ever go into this in one of the podcasts?
I don't think we
I don't know.
have. We're
But
running out of
anyway,
time, but that's
what?
great. I think
Okay,
it's a good.
okay. But anyway, they were luring young farm girls from the Midwest to Chicago with the promise of quote unquote jobs, and it turned out to be human trafficking. So there was a 16-year-old girl who managed to escape. She went to the She went to the feds, and they didn't have an FBI at that time, but they had something similar to an FBI. She was supposed to. She was supposed to testify in front of Congress about her about what happened to her, about this whole sex trafficking operation that involved the the government, the mayor, the police commissioner. It was the same thing like you saw in the movie Taken.
Yeah.
Everybody was, all the officials in Chicago were involved in it. The day before she was supposed to be under witness protection from the federal government, the day before she was supposed to testify, they murdered her. Someone got to her and murdered her.
Wow.
16-year-old girl.
I mean, there's still corruption nowadays with all sorts of politics and whatnot,
Mhm.
but it,
But you know what? We're still here.
yeah,
We're still a country. We're still here, and we're still functioning. And don't worry, we'll get through this too.
it just feels so dark right now. It feels so dark.
Remember what the Rebbe said?
Dark
When is the
light, yeah.
darkest time is before the dawn. and when you look at a circle, I forgot where I heard this. I think it was Rabbi Gordon in one of his one of the Chabad.org shiurim said, if you go around a circle, when you're at the bottom of the circle, right after the deepest part of the circle, the bottom, you go towards the top.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. The thing is that like you think this is the darkest and then it gets darker. That's the other point. That's, I would say, is something to really think about.
Listen, we'll get to this. Think of the McCarthy era. Oh, was that?
Oh yeah, that was terrible.
That was a nightmare. People were being dragged in for investigation just for having a friend who maybe attended one Communist Party meeting way back in the 1930s when it wasn't even illegal. It was really crazy. But you know something? Hey, we're here. We got through it.
Yeah.
The Rosenbergs paid with their lives, but we got through it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the question is, are you going to be the Rosenberg? Or are you going to be the one that's outside of it? And it's like, so you want to get into the more personal situation where it's like, well, yes, in general, we'll all get through it. The question is, will I? So you got to really start asking yourself, what's going on.
And I remember when I was a kid, the Russians were going to bomb us.
It's funny because the
duck and we got through. What happened? It never happened.
The duck and cover was really just used in order to count the bodies. It was never to do anything but that. They just wanted to preserve the bodies of any debris or anything like that, and keep everything organized. So in case any nuclear Holocaust thing happened, they could just count how many bodies, how many people have been killed.
They never told us that.
Yeah, they wouldn't want to.
We were lied to.
Yeah, that's the other thing, Ima. People nowadays are realizing how much the government lies. I think I remember seeing this one stand-up comedian being like, I don't trust anyone who doesn't believe in any conspiracy theories. Because, I lie to my kids. So the government is definitely lying to us. And I lie to my kids for their own protection. Like they can't comprehend certain things, they don't know. But I think the same thing with the government, it's like they're not going to tell you everything. They want to keep some things in line. I think aliens are going to be a big thing in about a couple of years. It's so obvious. It's so obvious. They're really prepping us for it, like an alien, that invasion, but whatever. That's what I believe. It's just it's so obvious. It's so out there. It's you can't even refute it, Jeez.
Oh gosh. I don't believe in space aliens, by the way.
You don't believe in space aliens?
I don't believe in space
really?
Aliens, yeah.
You don't believe in aliens?
I do not believe in space aliens.
Why?
I think something in the Gemara that says that the only place where there is actual life is this earth.
But what about the stories of how Mars became desolate because of war?
We don't know that for a fact yet. I don't know.
You said yet. That means you believe in it. There's a possibility. I knew it. I got you. Come on, Roswell, here we come.
Well, you know something about Mars? There's very something interesting. Like people who are talking about climate change, our pollution is causing climate change. You know that Mars is also warming up. The polar ice caps on Mars are melting.
Yeah, there's difference between seasonal climate change and forced climate change from the amount of carbon dioxide that's been pumped into here since the early 1900s due to the Industrial Revolution and so on and so forth.
I don't believe in that either. I think that the Earth goes through natural periods of cooling and heating.
You could believe whatever you want.
It's not that I don't believe that we should do something about pollution. Doing something about pollution is very, very important.
Yes.
But I don't believe in this business of going so overboard with people causing climate change that you're going to cause a major economic depression in the world because you're going so overboard in these, and trying to limit fossil fuels. I mean, I don't believe that they should be polluting. No, they need to develop, and they are developing better methods of filtering.
All right, Ima, we're out of time. Thank you so much. Right. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. Have a good Shabbos. I love you.
Good Shabbos. Love you.
We'll talk about this later on after post